Hello everyone and welcome to All Things Watched. In this video we are going to talk about episode 1 of season 2 of the brand new MCU Phase 5 project, which is titled What If. And like I said, this is actually season 2 and I was a huge fan of the first season, and so I can't wait to jump into this one and talk about this one and watch the whole series and review the whole series. And episode 1 was titled What If Nebula joined the Nova Corps. So let's just jump right into the scene. So this episode opens with the death of Yondu. It opens with Yondu, and he's already dead by the time we see him. And so, of course, by now, Nebula is already working for the Nova Corp, and she is here with, I believe this character is actually a character known as Garthan Seal. Now, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's who he is. He's Garthan Seal, and he's there, and she's there investigating Yondu's death, but of course she comes from a very dark past, because she was a part of, evil. She was doing a lot of evil things before she joined the Nova Corps, and so he is, sort of slandering her and sort of reminding her of her history, even though she knows who she is. And she actually says in this scene as well, she says to him, "I've earned my stripes here at Nova Corp just the same as you," and I really, really like that. And then, of course, it ends up breaking away, and then the actual What If opening sequence plays, and this is actually something that they did not do in Season 1, which is brand new here now in Season 2, which is a lot of these episodes, or at least, a few of these episodes out of the first 4, they only have 4 episodes released at the time of me filming this, recording this review, but this is something that's a little bit different. They sort of give you an opening scene, and then they go into the opening sequence, and then they sort of give you backstory of what universe or the circumstances of the universe that we're watching, and then the story continues. So I really liked how they did that here. Now, I also think it's worth mentioning as well that there is very much sort of like a dark noir vibe to this whole thing, and what it reminded me the most of is it actually reminded me of a combination of 2 different projects. It really reminded me of Blade Runner, but it also really reminded me of like a 10 or 15 minute short anime from the Matrix franchise. Specifically, when they released the Animatrix, there was a little 10 to 15 minute short there, which actually leads into the first Matrix movie, which was actually called The Detective, and that was all about Trinity, and the detective was trying to find Trinity. And I really got that vibe here, whereas Nebula sort of taking the place of that detective, and plus then it's like she's on this planet Xandar, and it's very much like a Blade Runner type feeling. So after we get the opening sequence, now they start to give us a little bit of the backstory. We see Nebula here, sort of abandoned here in space, and this is just, like I said, a little bit of a backstory where they're sort of setting up the circumstances and explaining to us that when she was in this very dark place, she ends up getting saved by Nova Prime of the Nova Corp, and they ends up rescuing her and training her and whatnot. They also explain here in this opening sequence, right after the title, the opening title sequence, they explain that Ronan the Accuser actually ends up overpowering and killing Thanos, so he, I guess, is sort of a bigger threat now than Thanos. I did find that a little bit hard to believe, but at the same time, this is a what if, episode, so, it probably would never really happen truly in the comics, or in reality, this would not really happen. Thanos, Ronan would never actually be able to beat Thanos, but here, for this specific story, like we said, this is a what if, and in this what if, Ronan overpowered Thanos, and so we learned that he is now sort of the threat of this universe. And then they give us a really cool scene here with Nebula actually training. You can see her front and center. She's the only one that has like sort of like a bluish skin, so it was really cool to see her trained, and I really loved that. They also showed us a lot of the circumstances of the actual moon, or the planet Xandar. Here you can see where Ronan was actually coming, and he came to actually destroy the planet altogether. And so what the Nova Corp did is they ended up creating a shield shield, and they literally use this shield to enclose the entire planet so nobody can get in or out, including Ronan the Accuser. Now, this is sort of a callback, or very reminiscent, if you can remember, to the main Marvel Universe 616, back to the second Avengers movie, Avengers Age of Ultron, when Tony Stark, Iron Man, was actually talking about putting a suit of iron around the entire world. Well, that's sort of what Nova Corp did here with Xandar. They actually put the shield and totally enclosed Xandar, and now nothing can leave or come or go. And so to me, it really reminded me of that line that Tony Stark gives in a previous, in one of the previous movies, the second Avengers movie. So next, it goes back to Nebula now, which, like I said, I really liked how they give us, how they showed us at the very beginning the story that's going to be told, but then they also show you the backstory and say, hey, in this universe, Ronan beat Thanos. In this universe, Nebula was saved by Nova Prime. In this universe, Nebula is trained as a Nova Corp agent or special agent investigator. In this universe, nobody can leave or come or go to Xandar because of Ronan just hovering and waiting to attack. And so now we go back to Nebula, and she's continuing her investigation for Yondu. And I really liked, and I thought it was very clever, the writing for this scene, because she uses her hologram. Remember, she's Nebula is very much a sort of a robot, so to speak, or kind of like a cyborg, and she has the ability to do this kind of stuff. And she plays a video of Yondu, and in the video, Yondu whistles, and so she's able to find the arrow that he controls. And I just thought it was very clever that she used a recording of him whistling to reveal and uncover some evidence. And when she gets the evidence, she ends up learning that the evidence that she ends up finding is that the arrow actually has a map sort of encoded or encrypted inside of it, and she has no idea what it means or how to read it or even what it is. So she ends up bringing this arrow to this person who's supposed to be, in really high authority, and this, sort of like a high roller here on Xandar, with lots of resources, lots of connections, lots of intelligence. And of course, it turns out that this person is Howard the Duck, and Howard the Duck is actually a full-time character in this episode for the most part. I mean, he plays a very big role in this episode, and I was really excited to see Howard the Duck actually, sort of take front and center stage. I really liked him in the main universe, but now I like him even more here in What If. It's just so cool to see Howard. And I loved him in this. The person that was voicing Howard the Duck was Seth Green, and he did a phenomenal job. And it was really cool seeing his back and forth with Nebula. He's very witty, very smart, but he was also very much a duck, which I really appreciated. So he tells her that he's not really 100% sure about what the map is or what it means, but somebody else that's here at this bar is, of course, Korg, and he understands and knows who it is and knows what this map is, and he explains it to him. And Korg is definitely the humor of this episode, because for the most part it is a very dark noir type, investigative type thing, like a very type episode, I'm sorry, very much like Blade Runner. So it's good that we had Korg in here, because Korg was very much the comedic element, but so was Howard the Duck. Howard was really funny too. And now these are not the only characters that we found in this bar either. Drax was there, Groot was there, and I can never remember the name of the other character. I think his name was Scourge or something like that, the other character, but anyways, we'll get to that later on. So anyways, Nebula, when she gets this little bit of information from Korg, she ends up going and breaking out another character known as Yon-Rogg, who was voiced by Jude Law, and of course she needs his help because of his intelligence and because of how smart he is, and so she breaks him out and helps him escape. And so he ends up taking her to they end up going to this certain location, and he uses his skills and his talents to sort of infiltrate this base or this area that they're going to, or this form of supercomputer or whatever it is. And they have a really funny back and forth here, because he's trying to listen to this lock type thing, which is digital and very much like a hologram, but there's no actual gears or springs. And she actually says that to him, what are you listening for? You can't hear anything, which I just thought was really funny and also very true. And it was to me, I literally laughed out loud when I seen that, because I was thinking about, because even me, I never really thought about the fact that this was digital and it was a hologram. So I was, once she points it out, she's like, "What are you listening to? There's nothing there." Then I was like, "Oh yeah." So I just thought it was really funny and really clever from the writing standpoint to include those little bits there. And also, I want to really give a lot of credit to Karen Gillan as well, who voices Nebula, and actually plays Nebula too in the real live action. Like her voice, because she's narrating this entire episode, but she also does a really good job at speaking in the episode too. And it's like her voice, how she speaks in the episode really matches how she narrates the episode. And I just thought they did a really good job at blending the narration with her actually, interacting with characters. They did a really good job with that. And so they end up getting in, and then here we get some almost like some very, Matrix type stuff here, because once again, Nebula is a machine. She is able to hook into the system, and she is, she's able to hook into the system and basically get a whole bunch of information. However, once she gets locked into the system, then Yon-Rogg, or Yon, ends up betraying her, which was a little bit predictable, I guess, because of the fact he was a bad guy, and and she was very likely responsible for putting him there, I would imagine, or at least had something to do with him going there. And so he ends up putting in sort of like this USB drive into her operating system, which causes her to react in this way. It's almost like it hurts her, sort of shutting her down. Now personally, I thought it might have actually overwritten her code or something, or done something to her mechanics where she would actually turn evil, but it doesn't actually affect her in that way. She's not actually evil, it seems like it just kind of hurts her, but either way, she's able to escape, and she gets out. Or well, actually, she passes out first. I think is what happened. She ends up passing out. She escapes the machine, and then ends up passing out somewhere along the ways. And then when she ends up waking up, she's surrounded by the Nova Corp. And this scene was actually almost hard to watch. They really beat her up. They beat her literally to the point where she almost dies, but she's able to regain just enough strength to get away. She barely escapes, but she do escape, and then she ends up back at the casino, which is ran by the High Roller, of course, Howard the Duck. And as you can see now, some of the characters are starting to come together. You got Howard, Nebula, Groot, and of course Korg, and the other character, which I think is Scourge, or Scourge. I can never remember his name, but I think it's Scourge. And of course, they end up getting her back to normal. And her and Howard actually ends up having a really funny banter, a really funny back and forth, where she's asking him if if he has a bunch of weapons, if he has a bunch of sort of like military grade weapons, and he's kind of not wanting to tell on himself because she is a part of the Nova Corp. So he's like, well, let's just say hypothetically I had these things. And it was just really funny. Once again, Seth Green and his voice of Howard the Duck, he just did such a great job at voicing it. And then of course Nebula, sort of playing off of them. They just did a really good job with the editing and with the voiceovers and whatnot. Part of me was curious if they done any of these scenes while they're actually in the same room, or was it just really edited together just really well. So I wasn't really 100% sure. So anyways, then we come to the next scene, and we see them all grouped together now, almost like, this is sort of like I guess you could say, a what-if version of Guardians of the Galaxy, which was really cool. And I would actually really like to see this team actually in real life. I'd love to see Korg, Nebula, Howard the Duck, Groot, and maybe even like Rocket Raccoon or somebody. Like, it'd be really cool to see all these characters actually on the big screen. And so they get ready to go. And also, it's worth noticing as well, Howard the Duck has his red bandana on, which I think is probably the first time we actually seen that, because in the comics he wears a red bandana. And so while they are basically during they're on their way now to go to Nova Prime and sort of set everything straight, we see here that Nova Prime ends up opening up the shields, which would essentially allow Ronan to come in and invade excuse me. But Nebula and of course her gang of the Guardians of the Galaxy ends up intervening, and they gets there just in time. And as you can see, both sides of both sides are squaring off with each other. But it's also worth mentioning as well that, as you can see, Nebula is now wearing the thing on her head, which Yondu used to use when he whistled to control the arrow. So she sort of steps up and takes that place of Yondu, and she's rocking the Ravager coat, and she starts whistling and using Yondu's arrow as well, and she really does a good job with it. So it was really cool to see Nebula sort of step up into that plate, especially with how Guardians of the Galaxy 3 ends. Guardians of the Galaxy number 3 ends with Gamora sort of joining the Ravengers and joining Yondu. So in this story, in this What If episode 1, it was just really nice to see Nebula sort of step up. And it was also really nice to see Nebula have her own story as well. I really liked this one, especially how it is like a very much a dark noir. So they end up having a really cool sequence here, fighting sequence, and Korg ends up just absolutely beating the crap out of these two soldiers, and they treated him basically like Hulk. He really has a lot of the same powers as the Hulk. He's just smashing them and killing them and really putting them together. And then sort of the battle ends up concluding basically with Nova Prime. She's hanging off the side of a building, and Nebula actually puts her hand out to save her, but she ends up shooting at Nebula. She misses, but in the during that little interaction of her trying to shoot Nebula, she ends up falling off and falling to her death. And of course then Ronan, who's in his spaceship, ends up dying because they close the shield, which actually cuts the ship in half while he's in there, and the ship explodes and all that good stuff, which was probably the only part of this whole episode that I could say I thought was a little bit weak, because for one, Ronan was strong enough to be able to overpower and kill Thanos, but then he's defeated just because the shield cut the spaceship in half. So that part I thought was a little inconsistent, but that was only a very small nitpick and a very small complaint. And then of course the final scene of the episode is now when Nebula and her team has won and set everything straight, and I believe they even opened up the force field as well. They took down the shield so that people could go and sort of come and go as they want. And of course Howard the Duck is here, and this is a really cool shot actually of Howard, because he not only does he have the red headband, but he also has his military, or sort of like this military grade armor that he's wearing. And the funniest part about it is that he actually has, he really has his martini there. So even after the heat of battle, he has his martini. And Nebula looks at him and tells him that he's safe, he's okay, and she's not going to take away his liquor license and whatnot. And when she says that, he actually quacks like a duck. So I thought that was really funny as well, because he is a duck. So it was really funny to see that. And honestly, I thought Howard the Duck and Nebula, of course, were the two stars of this show. They were definitely the best parts of the show. Obviously Nebula was. The whole episode was based on her, but Howard the Duck and Seth Green, speaking as Howard the Duck, they really stole the show, and their interaction was perfect. And honestly, I could watch an entire animated series just with this one team alone. And I really enjoyed episode 1 of What If. I love this sort of dark noir that that Marvel has done with these characters, and to me it was really appropriate. It really suited the character of Nebula, because we've never really seen this side of Nebula in the MCU. It's always been sort of her either being extremely angry and needing to sort of have always angry at Gamora, or it took her a long time to really calm down and sort of turn over to the good side. But then by the time we get to Guardians of the Galaxy 3, she's she does calm down a little bit, and she's a little less angry. But I do feel like, even though this is a what if story, I did feel like this could still be our Nebula, given another few years of her just sort of, learning who she is now that she's not a bad guy and stuff. So I thought that for the character of Nebula, the story development was done very well with this episode. And I really liked it. I thought this was a great episode. I thought it was a great way to start season 2 of What If. If this is if this first episode is any indication to what the rest of the series is going to be, then I think that What If Season 2 is going to be really, really good, and I think it's going to be a treat for everybody, and I can't wait to see where the story goes from here. I just hope that this is not like the best episode, because I think this episode is going to be very hard to top, and I hope that this is not the best episode that they have because I wouldn't want each episode to get worse as it goes. So so I'm hoping that this is not the best one that they have. I'm hoping that the episodes will continue to get better and whatnot, but like I said, this was really good. And also I think it's worth mentioning as well, the animation looks really, really well. You can tell that this is a very high budget animation. It looks really good. The sound was really good in this episode as well, the sound design, the sound engineering, and of course the obviously the story and the characters. But like I said, the animation and the sound were done very well as well, and this really did feel like a true What If story. I feel like season 1 felt more like, it was all of our characters that we always knew and loved, and then, but maybe like this was just a different version of those characters, with the exception of Thor, because Thor in season 1 was not like the Thor that we're used to, really. But whereas with this series so far, at least in this one episode, even though this Nebula felt very familiar, she was very different, and this really felt like a true What If scenario as opposed to season 1. But anyways, folks, that's my review for episode 1 of What If Season 2. Let me know in the comment section below what you thought of this episode, and tell me if you liked it. Let me know why or why not. If you like this video, click that subscribe button, and if you want to help us grow, like, share, comment, and all that good stuff. And even if you're not a subscriber, comment anyways. I love talking and hearing your opinions down in the comment sections and all that good stuff. And that's pretty well all I got. So until the next one, take care.